time, I'm going to go through the directions very quickly. This is the stuff that the students would be using to help them facilitate their own personal study and focus mostly on the teacher modeling for the sake of time. So feel free to pause it at every point of the directions if you like to read more. So the first step is going to be a silent cold read, and I'll go over expectations for that after this. The second step would be to research background knowledge and the time period as well as the author. After that, the students are going to apply and transfer that information in an annotating activity. Next step, they're going to integrate their understanding of what they have studied at every single step and continue with analyzing. After that, they're going to share their final notes and deductions about the poem. And then they're going to put together various different participation activities and presentation activities in preparation for their presentation, and then prepare to present. So my teacher example, here's my poem. I've separated it out, and the directions showed that in this case, the students are supposed to go through and underline in a cold read style, meaning they're not talking to their friends, they're not reading it out loud to a partner. This is deeply personal. They're supposed to underline words that help them to understand the central idea of the poem, as well as circle words that they don't know. So again, this is personal. Thinking about myself as an adult reader, of course, the word veil is going to be one that I don't know. But given the academic vocabulary and the conversational vocabulary of your class, it may be different. So look at some of the things that I've highlighted, that I've underlined, and kind of think about how this goes along with the theme of nature. The students are, again, doing this quietly, so no support from their teacher. Some more of the words that kind of stand out. Phrases that kind of stand out, going back to our theme of nature, our scenic environment that we're in with our author Williams Wordsworth in a field of daffodils. So now, after I've already determined, because in comprehension I didn't understand my first read what this poem was about. I've never seen it before. Now I'm going to go back in and I'm going to take some of the questions that I have and research them. So the big question we have is, why is Wordsworth writing about nature? What time period is he in? Is this a metaphor for life, or is this a literal piece where he's just writing about nature? And to answer those questions, he is just writing about nature because this is the Romantic time period. The focus is on myself and learning about myself through nature and my connection with nature. Sometimes isolation from civilization and the rules of society is encouraged so that I can go out into nature and find the beauty in it. Romantics also kind of focus on the positive, right? So even amidst everything that's going a little bit awry, I am focusing in on what is good, right? So that is what our author is a part of. And then a question that we have, which is different than a question we'd have about another poem, right? This is the topic of the poem, so focus on the topic of the poem, is what is a daffodil, right? I've seen tulips, I've seen daisies, I've seen plenty of different kinds of flowers, but a daffodil might not be one that everybody knows about. So I've included a picture. In their inquiry, they may ask a different question, but how can we better understand this or visualize this poem? Next up, we're going to ask and answer questions. And again, you can pause this if you want to look a little bit more into what I'm writing about. But I've used the Q&A style. The students can write in the margins with any skill that helps them to understand. If they wanted to focus on perspective, they'd be writing inferences about perspective. If they wanted to focus on theme, like the theme of nature, they'd be writing inferences about that, right? But just in a comprehension kind of a sense, an author's perspective kind of sense, why does he do what he does, right? So again, go ahead and pause if you want to see that. But the students would be taking that first step where they underlined and circled things, and now they're asking and answering questions. So we see that vale is a valley, right? We're connecting the prior lesson, which is that this is the Romantic time period, we are noticing how the, daffodils and the elements of nature are being personified as happy because they're dancing. A note about fluttering and dancing is fluttering and dancing helps me to infer that they're probably happy, because if they were gloomy or morose or sad, they wouldn't be experiencing this high energy transfer of fluttering, right? As a dance, an interpretive mopey dance would be different, right? And then the stars are shining, which is a contrast with the darkness of nighttime, right? And then the waves are something that's being pointed out as a happy part of nature too, and his emotional fulfillment. Then we're kind of showing how he's reminiscing, even though he's not currently in nature. When he's on the couch, his heart is still filled with pleasure about it. So this is step 4. So again, the last step was not going to be turned in for points. It's more of a formative opportunity. This is more of a summative opportunity, 4 points to show what I know. And what we know from this stanza is that when Wordsworth is in the field of golden daffodils, he's not only enjoying the fluttering and the dancing of the daffodils and relating them back to being happy, but he also is noticing other things, like a cloud is lonely, right? And again, we're noticing that we're not necessarily seeing that lonely has a negative connotation in this meeting, right? Because the romantics are wanting to spend time by myself so that I can learn about myself and how I am aware of myself and my surroundings. So he's wandering around lonely because he's being given the opportunity to connect to himself. And he's seeing things like valleys and hills, and he's seeing things like daffodils that are beautiful. And this setup for the lake is important too, because it never shows us or comes back to the setting of the waves. So we have to remember in this first stanza that the lake is where they are, right? Beneath the trees. So he's taking in the whole setting. And then we're talking about how it's kind of transitioned tonight and that the stars are continuous. So we're looking at how nature is present and ongoing, and it never really stops, right? So even when, society, again, this is a part of the romantics, when society is kind of turbulent or when society is tough to understand, the stars are always shining. They never change their emotion, right? The flowers are always swaying. They never stop doing that, right? Or the waves are constantly churning. And while the waves can churn at a faster rate, right, at a lake, we can definitely notice that the lake is probably mostly calm and serene in an environment where I can be at peace and be joyful. So again, there we are. We're at the waves, where this is something that brings me joy. We can kind of look at all the visual cues that he's giving, but we can also add on auditory cues too. So lakes that are churning and the waves that are churning can kind of also go back to hearing the sound of water running and how that relaxes me, right? And that the idea, the catchphrase that says, the wealth the show to me had brought, right? That he feels that nature is a place that brings him value and worth. And then it talks about that he is filled with joy, even reminiscing while he's on the couch, right? So it's such a positive place, and his memory is impacted, right? He is so overjoyed that he'd like to jump up and dance even when he has left this scene. So the final note on this is that nature can impact our mood and can ground us. It can bring us joy, and it can also help us to become more reflective. It can slow down the pace of our lifestyle and kind of make our opportunities to connect, right, with nature and connect with ourselves. This is kind of a counterpoint to that, which is an opportunity where students could ask the class as they're presenting, is nature your happy place? Do you agree with the perspective of William Wordsworth, right? So some students might be like, yes, when I'm in nature, I'm myself, and I'm not thinking about school and all the chaos that it brings, and I'm able to disconnect from my devices, and this is something that brings me peace. While other people might be saying, being in nature to me is not my joyful place. I can't stop thinking about society when I go out into nature. Or when I go out into nature, all I can think about is how my clothes are going to get ruined by all of the dirt and grime, right? So this is the realistic version, and we might have students in between who are like, I'm fine with nature until there's a spider, or I'm fine with nature until I see a slug, right? And those are kind of the things that make them squirm, right? So these are the opportunities that students could provide for each other. And then again, they're going to do their checkpoints to make sure that the formative and summative assessments get separated. So this is what their summative opportunities would look like, basically. Again, this is a cold read without any deductions. So they're literally just reading this out loud as a performance to the class. And then they're showing their annotations, interpreting from their days, their separated days. And this would be a presentation to the class. And then here are my references. So I had to go to William Wordsworth to find the Romantic period and his biography and his style, and that this was literally just about nature, not about self. And then I looked up the word vale, which again was valley, with the Merriam-Webster dictionary. And then I had to cite the poem itself. Okay, thanks so much. Bye.